Are you an optimist or a pessimist with how the world is moving these days? Do you think that it's going to end a nuclear holocaust, that tribalism is happening, Trump is the beginning of the end of things breaking down? Or do you see things generally getting better?
Neither. So I don't think humans have changed that much in the last 500 years, maybe even 1,000 years. I think that circumstances change. Technology lets more news get out, blah, blah, blah. But I think that there was someone elected 100 years ago somewhere in the world, and that country thought that the world was ending. And in the Cold War, we were sure that nuclear holocaust was right around the corner. And I'm sure during the World Wars, it sucked, and people thought it was the end times. And I think people have just been predicting the end times since time started, basically. Started with the Mayans or whatever 1,000 years ago, saying that magic was going to kill it. And then Y2K was going to end the world. And I just think the world will just keep trucking.
Well, let's save the end times. Do you see the general trajectory of humanity as an upward slope or a downward slope, or a flat slope?
Quality of life, or how altruistic they are? Because you said that you find yourself as you get older caring more about the outside world.
Let's say that.
Than
Let's say
yourself.
let's say the average, and I know this is the hippie word, but the average level of consciousness.
No, flat.
You think flat?
I think it depends where you look. I think if you look at certain people and how completely consumed they are on Instagram with their own self-image, how they spend their money on editing and buying followers, and it's just all me. You could be convinced the world is completely vapid and completely self-centered. Or you look at other people that are giving to charity, or the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation, and you go, wow, the billionaires of the world have started to finally care. And people are just people. Some part of the population is really self-centered. Some part of the population is altruistic. And I think that's been true since Marcus Aurelius. So yeah, I don't think that the world is ending, and I don't think people are necessarily evolving. I think that reach has increased. You know, your altruism 1,000 years ago might have looked like deciding to spend more of your time repairing the houses of your neighbors. And now you're capable of raising a lot of money for wells in Africa. But yeah, someone 1,000 years ago had the same epiphany as you and went, I'm going to help the world. And at that same time had a vapid neighbor. And now you're having this realization while there's an incredibly vapid person doing something that's totally me focused. So yeah, I think it's pretty flat.
So I think it's up. And this was very myopically focused, but it was started because Paul called me because I told him about our charity. He said he told his friends about his charity, and he's like, I think that there is a possibility of a chain. And we have this podcast, it's not huge, and we have a channel that's not huge. And of course, I guess I'm viewing it perhaps within a span of 10 to 20 years, but over the last, say, 20 years, what I saw, and even 50 years, news used to be an hour show that you watched, and then it got shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and it was a shorter segment, and then it was a tweet, and then it was a headline, and then it was just screaming about negative things that have happened. And our media also shrunk in attention spans to basically just trigger the most viral of emotions, which is essentially anger. And then I think something that I didn't predict would happen, and it's small, but I do think there's people who listen to podcasts. And it's not the number one thing that people do. But I am shocked that the average human psyche would listen to two people sitting on a couch discuss a big idea when they have the option of Twitter and Facebook. And I don't know that it's everybody, but I hear at least more removing from Facebook. I see that at least in my group, stepping away from Twitter, stepping away from Facebook, interested in bigger ideas, long form content. And I do think that good ideas require that. So at least within the media landscape, I see the opportunity, the environment that is good for better ideas to spread rather than for worse ideas.
But why wouldn't that just bring us back to pre-internet even in terms of altruism? Certainly there was a time where people would watch hour-long TV shows and read newspapers. Would that mean that they were more altruistic because their number one form of media they consumed was long form enough for complex ideas? Because then you'd say any use of Instagram means a decrease in altruism. If your hypothesis is that the longer form of content, the more altruistic a society.
No, and that's not, that would be overly simplistic. But I think, and again, this is
not to kill your buzz.
This isn't. It's not podcast equal better world, certainly. and again, this is just from my world, and maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe 30-year-olds have different interests than 24-year-olds do. And so the people around me are becoming more otherly focused.
Yeah, I think that's almost impossible to argue against. A child is going to be very self-interested, right? 3-year-old, for the most part, will be less altruistic and more focused on.
Absolutely. No, there's an evolution that occurs
me
naturally over the lifespan.
So yeah, I think the fact that your friends are 32 might be the biggest reason.
Yes, but we have a 22-year-old friend, and this is just one, that we met on the internet, that we could not have ever been put in touch with pre this. And I think without he has a channel, but he also knows us. And so for a 22-year-old who has access to 32-year-olds, we often remark how impressed with him we are. Because he is adopting ideas that are beyond his time and becoming less self-centered, less party boy, less whatever you would expect from a 22-year-old. And I see those opportunities increasing, at least in my own life. That's just what I encounter. Now, maybe that's the reflection of me.
I think it's an N of one,
It could be.
I think that there were 22-year-olds that were super selfish 50 years ago, and I think that there were 22-year-olds that were really focused on charity and altruism and their community.
Well, so unfortunately, given that we disagree, we're going to spin in circles because we have no data here.
I agree.
There's no
need to bat it back and forth. But no, I think that people are people, and I think that the tools we have vary over time, and I think that our core psyches are pretty flat. And I think that throughout the span of recent time, there have been tons of selfish people and tons of great people. And I think that's true across parties and time periods and genders. And
so you think, well, then that same thesis would say that 500 to today is not much better than 500 years ago. It is not much better than 500 years before that.
Altruism or quality of life?
Say altruism.
No, I don't think it is.
I think we could prove that this is the most altruistic time. At least what I've heard, there are facts that this is the most altruistic time that has ever existed.
I think people just looked at their community. Because of the technologies, you wouldn't try to dig a well in Africa if 500 years ago you lived in Connecticut. But
I just mean general giving, general willingness to part with whatever one had acquired. So
I would question that. I actually think
we'd have to look at the data.
Probably the least sense of community ever in major cities in the history of humanity.
The least
sense of community. I think that 500 years ago, you probably really cared about your neighbors, and when someone got sick, they didn't TaskRabbit food to themselves. They had neighbors that would take care of them, and then when their neighbor got sick 6 months later, they would take care of them. And now when I get sick, I use the Heal app to get a doctor to me. I use Postmates to get food to me. But I don't think that most people in major cities have this group of 20 or 30 people that they see every day, that they all go in on like a little kibbutz, a little communist community. And they go, listen, when one of us goes down, the other 29 are going to be there through thick and thin, and we'll just rotate. I think in 2019 in major cities, that's less common than in rural areas and in the past pre-technology.
So I would be super interested to see if anyone had done a study. Now we would obviously both agree that quality of life has improved.
Yes, massively.
We wouldn't argue with that.
Massively. And I think the level of altruism in terms of reach is different. Because like I said, I think this was
so I think maybe here's a bridge. Part of what we recognize is that I'm only able to give because I have achieved the Maslow's basic level of needs, right? People cannot think about a larger sense of giving back until they have food, shelter, and even status to a degree. So part of what I do think is happening, and you mentioned the tech billionaires, is that an increasing number of people are getting those bottom layers of the pyramid handed to them. Which allows, for the first time ever, the possibility of higher self-actualized things to start to take place.
I think people give too afar to strangers more. But I think the altruism score that you would have in terms of the amount of time and money that you spend on other people wouldn't be higher, because I do think there was a much bigger sense of community. I think there was a bigger sense of helping your neighbor,
Got it.
And so now you're helping people in Africa, which is awesome, but you're not thatching roofs when things go bad. You know what I mean? You're just calling your landlord or telling your neighbor to figure it out for themselves,
So I do see what you're saying. I still think, I guess, that the point of the Maslow's thing stands in the sense that, if you have a greater number of people that have the basic number of things taken care of, you can't thatch your neighbor's roof when your roof is totally messed up and you can't feed yourself.
No, but you would sacrifice more in a community that you relied on. we don't.
I got it. And this is getting a little bit too heady. And then I go, is that altruism or is that enlightened selfishness at
all
that point?
Altruism.
Yeah,
is enlightened selfishness.
Sure. Well, then I think the scope, and we've said this, the scope of what one defines as, even though our community is not tightly tied to our neighbor, the role of the human community, I do think for many people is expanded. And it's not amazing, but the fact that there's a modicum of concern for Hong Kong, for these sorts of things, I'm optimistic. I think, and I don't know that this has happened many times in history.
I wonder how much of the concern for Hong Kong results in action, and how much of the concern for Hong Kong is because you want to label yourself publicly as someone who's concerned about Hong Kong.
Totally, I agree. Or it's a wonderful thing to project your frustration with the man onto.
Exactly. Yeah. If you hate the man, or if you just want people to think that you're worldly, so you're tweeting about it.
Yeah.
But not actually doing anything to help anyone in Hong Kong.
We should make a bet. We should make a bet for 20 years from now. If we could pick a measure and we can see what, I don't even know what we would measure, but I'm optimistic. I think, and you're right, I am looking only to my own life, but I think with the advent of regular people are coming up to me and being interested in psychedelics, which I think is one of the things that transforms your sense of me to a greater whole. I would, let's come up with a metric for next week, and we'll do a handshake bet for 20 years from now of what direction things go. And if it's flat, you win, and I'll give you $100.
I think it's just always been the end time. It's always where you focus. You know, it's always where you put your energy. If you and I spent a week hanging out with the most vapid influencers in the world, you'd come away being like, I can't believe how self-interested the younger generation is. They're so self-interested. And then we could hang out with a different group of 22-year-olds that were super altruistic, and you go, wow, the younger generation is so evolved. They're so conscious. The world's heading in a great direction. And it's like, there's 7 billion people. Yeah. Where are you going to focus? That's what your recency bias is going to tell you the world is like.
Totally. I agree with that. I'm still going to make that bet.
I know you do. Yeah.
What else? Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.